Welcome back, everyone, to the Balance Patch League Challenge here from Allston, Massachusetts. I'm June, joined by the incomparable Jake, and we are very excited for our Round 2 matchup between John Lyons and Ethan Summer.
Yeah, so a bit of a throwback matchup when in regards to teams with the restricteds, and we'll see that in a bit. But definitely some teams that aren't super duper common. Some variants and one up and coming team, I would say. That's going to make this a really, really interesting round 2.
Oh yeah, the weather war is going to be on full display here. It's Groudon, it's Kyogre, it's the year of our Lord 2025, and we're still seeing these two go at it. About 20 years after they came onto the scene. It's just going to be so much fun, and I think we are going to get into looking at John Lyons' team first here in a second. Looking at the Kyogre team on our screen, I gotta say, my one qualm here is that item on the Kyogre.
Of course it is.
Wish it were Splash Plate, but everything else here, very, very exciting to see. The Electabuzz still carrying over from Ray Gage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Electabuzz, we saw a bit at the end of regulation, was it G, F? Is this F, G?
G.
G. On those Calyrex Ice teams made popular by Alex Underhill and company using that Electabuzz and Calyrex Ice. So interested to see it on a Kyogre team, but also support from this Roaring Moon with the Protosynthesis, assumed speed boosting with Tailwind, classic Rillaboom Incineroar, and Urshifu Water to round things out.
Yeah, very, very similar in concept and most of the execution as the team that Oliver Eskelin used to finish second at the Birmingham Regionals just earlier today. Same idea, no priority Tailwind. You do have, of course, the speed booster, or presumably a speed booster energy Roaring Moon, and a fast Pokemon with a speed lowering move. In this case, it is John's Electabuzz. For Oliver's team, it was that drum beating Rillaboom that we got to see. But I'm very, very excited about what Electabuzz is going to be able to bring to this matchup as we are going to take a look at the other side for this Groudon team. Not a lot of Pokemon that you really want to click Electroweb into, but I think you've got some good targets there with the Chien-Pao and the Urshifu.
Yeah, so Ethan bringing a team that has been a bit up and coming, might have gone under the radar more recently, but is really coming up to be seen. I know we saw Zhejiang run it yesterday at Cheese League, or at least some variant of it. I didn't get to see the full team as I was on staff. But yeah, this Gouging Fire, Groudon, Volcarona. A lot of Pokemon that are boosted by the sun or protected by it. This support of Volcarona, I know, very strong in Zamazenta's. Chien-Pao to bolster the damage of these physical threats. And the Raging Bolt as just another dragon option alongside this Groudon. And making that Kyogre matchup just that much easier for a team that usually will struggle with it.
Absolutely, and especially when you're Groudon, you're thinking, oh, it has the Assault Vest. Now you can Terastallize into a type that is going to be useful against the Kyogres. No, it's going to become a Fire type that's just as weak to those Water Spouts and the Origin Pulses coming out. But you do have some options to hit the Kyogre as well. If you can get your Tailwind up with Volcarona, guarantee that you're faster, and click a Thunder Punch on the Kyogre, that does very good damage. The thing that really surprised me about Jay's team yesterday with, again, the Assault Vest Groudon, the Clear Amulet Gouging Fire, was both how fast and still how bulky that Groudon was able to be with the Assault Vest item. Because you're able to invest a lot more into your speed stat, you don't have to worry about the bulk as much, and you're still getting a pretty good return on your investment there, while getting the extra coverage of Thunder Punch and Stone Edge to hit those flying types that otherwise Groudon really doesn't like to see.
Yeah, absolutely. All I can think of on my mind right now is seeing Groudon and Volcarona together back in 2025. Reminds me of the good times of 6 years ago. If you know, you know. And I'm excited to see these Pokemon hit the field, as it is going to be a lead from Ethan of Raging Bolt and Volcarona. And on John's side, that Incineroar and the Rapid Strike Urshifu.
And it's times like these, I'm just so glad that we get to see nicknames at our locals. I think 4 for 4 on the nicknames here. The Teddy the Urshifu, the Ivan the Rampaging, this Incineroar, and then of course J.R.R. Vulcan and the Bolt 45. A lot of fun being had here, but a lot of fun these two players can have. Whether that is the Fake Out and Surging Strikes pressure, or the Fake Out and Wicked Blow pressure. No, it is Surging Strikes. Yeah, it is Surging Strikes. It's the Single Strike Urshifu on Ethan's side that John is putting out to just stop the Raging Bolt from moving and trying to pick up a KO on the Volcarona very quickly. But Ethan still can balance that with a potential terastallization for the Volcarona and get Tailwind up, which I think is a lot more important for his side.
So, shockingly here, the Urshifu is actually under a lot of pressure, even in front of a Volcarona, because the Volcarona can threaten a Terra Water and a Rage Powder, which would redirect, be resisted, and threaten on each hit a 30% chance to burn this Urshifu. You know, John does have access to a Fake Out here, but can only Fake Out one of these two targets. If it fakes out the Raging Bolt, you're not going to be taking the Electric type damage. But if you Fake Out the Volcarona, you're not going to have your damage redirected. So kind of tossing up here, the Incineroar faking out that Volcarona here as a Terra Stellar close combat going into this Raging Bolt. Is it going to be enough for a knockout? No, it is not going to bring it down to about 10% of its HP. And it is going to have its Focus Sash preserved thanks to not hitting that Volcarona's Rocky Helmet, as a Thunderbolt is just going to bring it right down to its Focus Sash. So a pretty good turn from both of these players, getting this Raging Bolt that threatens your team so hard, so low, and getting the Urshifu off the, or almost off the field that also threatens your team. Both very, very big focused targets here, and I think both players made some good plays.
Yeah, I think the key is that they were both able to survive those hits. Of course, the Urshifu, you knew that it was going to survive on its Focus Sash, but this Raging Bolt just on a sliver of HP after the Life Orb recoil and the Terra Stellar close combat damage. I think John probably hoping that that would have picked up on this Raging Bolt, but just goes to show why it's so important to invest your effort values in these Pokemon, you know, just exactly so you don't take extra damage from that recoil. And Raging Bolt now gets to come back a little bit later, potentially get another attack off against this water-type team that John's running as Groudon comes in, and it's going to make life a whole lot harder for this Urshifu to try to click Surging Strikes right now.
Yeah, so I think Ethan here, going for the Tailwind, not the move I expected, but not letting this Raging Bolt go down to a potential Incineroar attack. I was thinking that John was getting the angle, potentially, of going for a knockoff into the Raging Bolt, which, because of the safety goggles, would have gone around Volcarona's Rage Powder and just picking up the KO that way before the Raging Bolt can move. Instead, just knocking off this Rocky Helmet and making it so this Urshifu can more freely attack without its Focus Sash being, or its last point of HP being at risk.
Yeah, the problem is that now the Urshifu is going to be slower than both of Ethan's Pokemon because of the Tailwind being set up. And crucially, Ethan preserving that low health Raging Bolt really allows for a lot more flexibility in the game plan for the rest of this game. With Tailwind up, now really the ball is in John's court to try to respond to all the pressure that Ethan's putting on offensively. You know, in the Weather War, you really need to preserve as many pieces as possible to continue to switch around, continue to reset your weather, and get rid of the other weather. As a Terra Stellar Aqua Jet in the sun, that's pretty respectable damage for that Groudon, a naturally very defensively bulky Pokemon, as this Heat Wave will finally pick up the 1 health or Urshifu, and Impress Blades, if it connects, will do massive damage to this Electabuzz, and just like that, John Lyons down to his final 2 Pokemon.
Yeah, Groudon taking its turn to launch that attack there made me think it was missing for a while, but then Electabuzz goes down. John gonna be able to bring his Incineroar and his Kyogre back in here, you know, threatening that Fake Out and threatening a lot of Water-type damage. The Groudon not having access to that Protect here is probably just going to want to switch out here, and Volcarona just being able to click Protect. And with that Tailwind up, you know, both of Ethan's Pokemon are going to be faster than John's here. So it's looking like Ethan is in the driver's seat here with all 4 of his Pokemon all well. Although that Raging Bolt just a smidgen away from getting knocked out. Ethan probably just going to send that in to get sacrificed, or possibly his last Pokemon to keep Groudon safe.
Yeah, you would absolutely imagine Groudon switches out here so that Ethan can bring it back in later, win the Weather War, have Sun up for the remainder of this game. For John's case, though, does still have a lot of pressure, at least this turn. The Volcarona cannot protect, as it's running Will-O-Wisp and Rage Powder over the protection move. The Groudon, because of the Assault Vest, also cannot protect in front of this Fake Out. And for the Volcarona, if you Fake Out the Groudon slot, the only offensive move it has is Heat Wave. Not going to do that much damage to this Kyogre, so a pretty safe Water Spout could be clicked here. And if the Fake Out goes into that Groudon slot to break the Focus Sash on Shenpao, as it does, we could be seeing a huge flip in fortunes here on this turn.
So a negligible Heat Wave going to come out here, do 10 damage to that Kyogre, as Water Spout is probably going to clean up these two Pokemon. No, Volcarona actually survives. I don't think that Heat Wave damage mattered, but just Volcarona's natural special bulk and HP there coming through, taking a Mystic Water boosted Water Spout there.
Yeah, honestly, I think the Heat Wave may have mattered there. The thing with Water Spout is that just even the smallest amount of HP under 100%, similar with Eruption on Torkoal, is such a big detriment to the amount of damage that you can do with that move specifically. You know, I've said long, Kyogre, Torkoal, they're HP merchants. All they do is be at full HP and click attacks, and even that 10 damage that the Heat Wave did may have been enough to let the Volcarona survive a couple more damage rolls. Now putting John in a pretty tricky position, even though his two opposing Pokemon on the field are at very, very low HP.
Yeah, so curious not to see Groudon come here and just immediately set the weather. But yeah, we see Raging Bolt come in here, gonna do a threatening amount of damage to this Kyogre. But Kyogre going to be able to protect, I believe. I'm not mixing this one up. But could just direct that damage into Incineroar. But either way, just being able to win that Weather War here is huge for Groudon in the endgame, as we just see a Sun-boosted Thunderbolt, not what you commonly hear, go into this Incineroar and pick up the knockout. Kyogre going to be able to launch an attack this turn. I believe Ethan calling out that Kyogre would protect, John not protecting, and just going to be able to launch an Origin Pulse here, actually, and do a ton of damage to this Groudon with a critical hit in the Sun. Not enough. Tailwind peters out, so now Volcarona is probably going to have to set that back up, and Groudon's going to be in charge of doing the rest of this damage to this Kyogre. Can it do it with a Precipice Blades or a Thunder Punch? With this amount of HP, I don't think it can, but we'll find out.
Yeah, crucially, it's going to depend on who is faster between these Pokemon. John locking in very quickly. That Water Spout this turn gives us a pretty good sense of how fast he thinks his Kyogre is relative to the Volcarona and the Groudon on the other side of the field. If this Kyogre moves first and is able to click Water Spout, I think that is just the game here. Crawling back from the 4-2 Pokemon deficit, and Water Spout does go off first before the Assault Vest Groudon and this Tailwind Volcarona gets John Lyons the Game 1 victory, even in the Sun, and another critical hit just for good measure will finish off that Groudon.
So, yeah, that was shocking. I really expected the Volcarona to move first here. I know looking at this Kyogre, it is a less bulky variant, but Volcarona really opting to go all in on its bulk and not a lot of speed, underspeeding even Kyogre here. Not usually the speed interaction you see, and I really expected that Tailwind to go, a potential Precipice Blades or Thunder Punch to go off, and then Water Spout through the Sun, through the Assault Vest. If it was low enough HP, I could have easily seen that Groudon surviving another turn.
Oh, absolutely. Volcarona Pokemon is naturally faster than Kyogre, but seeing how little damage that, of course, Volcarona had Terra Watered at that point on the first Water Spout, it still didn't KO from about that 65%, 70%, somewhere in that range. It's a very strong move. We did get word from our wonderful producer, Gerd, that it was 141 base power Water Spout that got clicked to that turn that allowed the Volcarona to survive that hit. It may have made a difference, that 9 base power, but crucially, knowing that Volcarona is so bulky and this Kyogre is apparently quite speedy gives us and these players a lot of information heading into Game 2.
Yeah, John making a huge call in that game right at the end. I'm not going to protect my Kyogre. I'm going to go on the offensive. I'm going to let Ethan potentially make the mistake and target my Incineroar, and that's just what happened. Had that been a target into the Kyogre slot, I think we would have seen, a much different game. We would have seen a Kyogre that was not long for this world.
Yeah, knowing how fast this Kyogre is, probably not trained the most in its defenses, and a Life Orb Photosynthesis boosted Thunderbolt should be more than enough to deal with the Kyogre. As for change-ups, as for adjustments these players can make, for John's side, I liked the 4 Pokemon that he brought. The big detriment of this Assault Vest on the Groudon is that it can be intimidated by the Incineroar, as opposed to the Clear Amulet variants that we see, or we had seen a lot more commonly in Regulation G the first time around. The Rillaboom, of course, is very important. If you do want to bring that Pokemon for hitting the Groudon before it terastallizes, although it was that Urshifu and the Electabuzz as the other support Pokemon for John's side. I'm curious to see, though, this Roaring Moon come out. It would be the fastest thing on the field, whether it is in the rain or in the sun because of its booster energy item, and gives John the potential to have his own Tailwind for his very speedy Kyogre to just click Water Spout pretty freely on this game.
Yeah, I think one crucial turn that we need to look at there from Ethan was the point when he switched in his Chien-Pao, actually, and took the Fake Out plus the Water Spout and immediately lost Chien-Pao when he could have had it with an intact Focus Sash, which would have been able to pick up Incineroar and then do good damage to the Kyogre. Wasn't able to do anything in that game. Just came in, got KO'd. Yeah, it allowed a switch, but Raging Bolt was so low, and yes, it was threatening the KO on Kyogre a little more easily, but just stopped his momentum dead in its tracks. You know, had a Pokemon that could have done a lot later, and wasn't able to come to fruition.
Yeah, so we're seeing this adjustment for Ethan, leading with that Chien-Pao next to the Volcarona, saying, you know, you got my Chien-Pao on the switch in, I wasn't able to click any attacks game one, now I'm showing it here immediately. We'll try to get it to do a little bit more, although two Pokemon it's staring down, it cannot hit very hard. You know, yes, you do have the Sacred Sword to hit Incineroar super effectively, but you're at -1 attack, and Fake Out pressure is online, and neither of these two Pokemon, the Chien-Pao or the Volcarona, love to see a Surging Strikes come their way unless we see a Terastallization.
Yeah, we don't see a switch on this turn from Ethan here, though. Just going for the Terra Water on the Volcarona. And I don't think this Chien-Pao is going to be around for very long. It didn't Terra Stellar this time, as we know because of the Terra turn orders, as Volcarona just taking a Fake Out here, getting affected by that Rocky Helmet. Flinching, so going for the Rage Powder there, as Chien-Pao goes for the Sacred Sword, going to bring that Incineroar below half, and the Surging Strikes going into Chien-Pao without the Terastallization is, I believe, always going to survive this attack.
Yes, there's a very slight chance, I believe, if the Chien-Pao has legitimately 0 defensive investment and the Urshifu gets very high rolls on every single Surging Strike, but Chien-Pao does survive through this turn. A very just solid play for John. You're clicking the Fake Out in the Volcarona, preventing what we saw was going to be a Rage Powder, because the Volcarona flinched before it could attack prior to both the Urshifu and the Chien-Pao. But now what do we do? The Volcarona feels pretty locked into it, clicking Rage Powder this turn, because you just can't give up your Chien-Pao to an Aqua Jet into that slot. If you're just clicking Rage Powder with this, a potential close combat with the Sword of Ruin boost could do a whole heaping help of damage. John, though, looks like locked in something a little bit different than that play.
Yeah. So we're going to see what transpires there. One thing I wanted to mention was that Ethan definitely needs to preserve that Raging Bolt. As we saw last game, took way too much damage early on and was not able to handle Kyogre in the endgame, which he kind of relies on. And we haven't seen it yet, so probably sitting there in the back, but not getting a huge start here where Raging Bolt is able to handle things.
Yes, we are going to see a Terastallization come out as well for John Lyons. Both of these players Terastallizing pretty early on in this game. The Incineroar likely trying to get away from another Sacred Sword onto that slot. And crucially with this, with the Safety Goggles item, will ignore any potential Rage Powders. Doesn't look like he's going for that though, as it will just be a Protect on the Chien-Pao and Tailwind for Volcarona. Getting a speed boost prior, or as the Roaring Moon comes in.
Yeah, so questionable play that kind of works out here. You know, protecting Chien-Pao in front of an Urshifu that can just Aqua Jet, pretty risky.
Yeah.
You know, I expected to see maybe a Will-O-Wisp come out and try to get a burn on the Urshifu or possibly the incoming Roaring Moon. But not going for the Rage Powder there and going for Protect, very, very questionable plays. Again, worked out, but curious what Ethan's angle is right here.
Yeah, well, it could just be a simple flip of fortunes as game one, where John made the correct call and that Raging Bolt was not going to target Kyogre, didn't protect it. Similarly, Ethan knows Urshifu very, very threatened by a potential Rage Powder on that turn. Probably won't stay in on, to just get burned and get hit by the Rocky Helmet damage. Knows that he can get potentially a free Tailwind setup, and now the Heat Wave comes out, hits the Urshifu, breaks its Focus Sash, and that's just, for John, one turn of Tailwind that has been stalled out, which is fantastic. But Ethan's still threatening some pretty good damage with this -1 Chien-Pao into this Roaring Moon. and Volcarona still just sitting right on top of this Urshifu, not allowing it to touch the Chien-Pao as long as it has Rage Powder in its arsenal.
Yeah. So I think Chien-Pao might be threatening a KO on the Roaring Moon here. Depends on the investment in its HP and defense. But Chien-Pao intimidated once, maybe going to be intimidated twice, looking pretty free to do that. And Urshifu in a questionable spot where Volcarona is really shutting down anything that it wants to do.
Yes, and so you see John trying to reposition here to set up the fake out pressure just like he had turn 1 of this game to fake out the Volcarona before it can click the Rage Powder, protect the Urshifu this turn. The real question is, yes, the Chien-Pao's at -2, but will this potential Icicle Crash do enough to this Incineroar that just switched in for the Roaring Moon?
Likely not, and we don't see a critical hit there, and obviously the Incineroar just didn't, so if it was going to flinch, didn't really matter there. But now a free fake out from John again, not safe to protect Chien-Pao because of Urshifu's Unseen Fist ability, and an Aqua Jet that could easily just go into that slot before it can get an attack off. Volcarona probably just going to take a flinch from fake out here, but really kind of wants to get a burn on these Pokemon, which it actually could now that Incineroar has terastallized.
Yeah, that is the one downside of the Ghost-type terastallization for Incineroar, is now it can be burned by the Volcarona, and between Rocky Helmet and a potential Flame Body burn, could be taking a whole lot of damage, and would seem to be in range of Burn Chip plus Rocky Helmet to faint this turn, if the Rocky Helmet doesn't just do it outright.
Yep. So Volcarona going to be able to do more damage with its Rocky Helmet than the Fake Out did to it. And we do actually see a very, very wise Groudon switching here. Chien-Pao switching out of a potential KO, as well as those -2 attack drops, and getting Groudon in for free in front of Incineroar, which is going to have to switch out if it wants to get a Intimidate on it again. And 2 Pokemon in the back that don't want to take physical damage. You know, this Roaring Moon, while it has already used up its booster energy, going to actually be able to abuse Groudon's Drought ability to get its speed back up here. But Groudon just threatening so much damage here. I'm really not sure what John's going to want to do. He can switch in Kyogre and try to get big damage off of Urshifu. But again, that Volcarona just being able to throw out Rage Powder is everything that Ethan needs right now. As we see a close combat going for the Volcarona, not enough damage. Gonna take some Rocky Helmet chip, and it could even get burned from Flame Body here, which we do see, and the Flame Body is gonna activate. Rocky Helmet gonna do its damage. Groudon, what's your move? Oh, sorry, Volcarona, didn't wait for you. You're gonna Tailwind. Groudon, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna throw out those Precipice Blades? Are you gonna hit? No, you are gonna miss Ivan, and you are gonna miss Teddy, and you are proving why you should have stayed in the past.
That a very, very unfortunate double miss on the Precipice Blade, specifically on that Incineroar, because allows that Incineroar to trade its HP pool, the remaining 3 hit points it had, for that Volcarona, now allowing Urshifu finally a little bit of freedom in this game, but after it's already lost half of its health and gotten burned. Could still be, a little bit of value at least. You have the Aqua Jets, you have a naturally very strong typing into both the Groudon and the Chien-Pao. But as it stands, a 3 versus 3 now, and we're going to see the Raging Bolt come out for Ethan's side, and I believe it's Roaring Moon coming right back out for John.
Yeah, so Raging Bolt, the Pokemon that Ethan has needed to get in a commanding position here, finally does get in that commanding position. Not sure how the speeds are going to work out with Tailwind versus the Photosynthesis speed boost. I would assume in most cases that this Roaring Moon is going to be faster than this Raging Bolt. I believe seeing how the Photosynthesis boost went, we did see that the Roaring Moon was faster off the bat here. But again, we have a burnt Urshifu. So even if Kyogre comes in, not going to be able to do a ton of damage, and it would be shutting off Photosynthesis.
Yes, and if Urshifu wants to attack at all, it always has to be conscious of a potential Thunderclap from Raging Bolt that was not clicked this turn. We do get confirmation that the Roaring Moon is faster not only than the Raging Bolt, but than the Groudon, even when those 2 Pokemon are in Tailwind.
Absolutely. So we see a Thunder Punch come out from Groudon. It is enough to finish off that Urshifu. Not the strongest move, but just enough when those defenses are dropped and when you're super effective. And a Draco Meteor going to come out from this Raging Bolt. It's going to miss again. So really unfortunate misses from Ethan here. He's been playing really well, but the odds just have not been in his favor.
And now you have this very speedy Kyogre that we got to see in Game 1 coming out with Tailwind up, with the Rain up, shutting off the Photosynthesis for both the Roaring Moon and the Raging Bolt. No Terastallization option for the Kyogre, will still take a whole lot of damage from a potential Thunderclap, but I don't know if that Roaring Moon or the Raging Bolt is going to be able to survive a Roaring Moon's knockoff plus the Origin Pulse plus the Life Orb recoil if it does choose to attack this turn.
For certain, and even if it was a Water Spout that came out here, I would assume Kyogre hangs on and can still do a considerable amount of damage, might even threaten the KO on Groudon, even from maybe 25% of its HP, but Ethan smartly just switching in Chien-Pao here. Probably going to go for a Protect on this Raging Bolt, keep it around for another turn, let Chien-Pao go off the field, and reset that weather to get Groudon back in. So very, very smart play from Ethan there. I completely forgot Chien-Pao was in the deck. A very smart save of a very low HP Pokemon. We do see the knockoff go into the Raging Bolt. If Kyogre clicks an Ice Beam into this Raging Bolt, or if this Origin Pulse misses, actually going to put Ethan on the back foot where he can't just bring in Groudon for free, and we do see Chien-Pao survive the turn. So Ethan banking on Chien-Pao getting knocked out there, and an unfortunate miss for Ethan.
Yeah, that you would. It's unfortunate that Ethan has gotten pretty unlucky in this game. Both the Precipice Blades misses, the Draco Meteor miss, and now wanting your Chien-Pao to get knocked out there so you can reset up the Sun for another Photosynthesis boosted Thunderclap, which should be enough, I would think, to knock out the Kyogre. You do, of course, have the option to switch your Groudon back in this turn for the Chien-Pao and go for that Thunderclap. If you believe that a Life Orb Photosynthesis Thunderclap is enough to one-hit KO this Kyogre. But of course, if the Kyogre can just Protect on that turn, you knock off the Life Orb, you know, all kinds of things happen with those modifiers once you remove just one piece of it.
Yeah.
We are going to see the Groudon switch right back in. We'll reset the Photosynthesis. We've got a little bit of time here to dissect these, behemoths that are on the field in front of us. I'm just curious on what Ethan locked in with that Raging Bolt and what John locked in with this Kyogre. It is the Protect.
So we do see the Protect come out from the Kyogre here. A knockoff going into this Raging Bolt, going to get rid of its Life Orb, and more crucially, bring it into a very close KO range as Draco Meteor finally lands into this Roaring Moon. Going to be a no-problem one-hit KO. And I'm curious to see Chien-Pao leave the field there, as there was Tailwind still up. He could have threatened an Icicle Crash KO into the Roaring Moon there, maybe not wanting to play with accuracy. I mean, it's 5% off from what Draco Meteor is. But nonetheless, or am I wrong on that? I think it's 90% accurate.
No, it is.
It is the same amount as Thunderclap without the Life Orb, but a critical hit.
Yes.
Enough
yeah,
to finish
-2,
off this Kyogre. So Ethan getting through some troublesome unluckiness to bring this one back. A few questionable plays in the department of, I do think that Chien-Pao could have stayed in there because Tailwind was still up, and risking that Groudon potentially. As well as the Raging Bolt, considering the fact that Kyogre could have just launched an Ice Beam into that slot. Not at risk for a Sucker Punch, maybe thinking, oh, maybe he'll go for Sucker Punch and Thunderclap. But Ethan ends up playing out those turns right to bring that one back from the clutches of defeat. This has been a great set so far. Ethan getting really unlucky, but overcoming those odds. Once again, I'll say it. And I think he knows exactly what he needs to do to beat John here. He needs to confirm that, conserve that Raging Bolt to handle the Urshifu Rapid Strike, to handle the Kyogre, to do big damage to that Roaring Moon. As well as, it can do big damage to the Incineroar too. I don't think anything on John's team has a resistance to this Raging Bolt in any capacity on both of its moves. I don't think there's very few Pokemon that resist both Electric and Dragon.
Yeah.
I can count them on my fingers. It's approximately like Whimsicott and anything that's typed like Steelix.
Tapu Koko.
Tapu Koko.
It's pretty much the list. It's not often that you see the Kyogre team be on the back foot against Groudon, but with the Terra Water Rocky Helmet Volcarona, with this Life Orb Raging Bolt, and of course the Chien-Pao for the Rillabooms, for the Roaring Moons, it just becomes very difficult for John to position correctly in front of Ethan's team. And to Ethan's credit, two things that he did phenomenally in that game too were, once again, preserving a low health Pokemon to win the Weather War in the endgame, and very crucially, getting that Kyogre Protect turn correct in Game 2 that he didn't get in Game 1. knowing that Kyogre likely going to protect in front of a Thunderclap, was able to get the Groudon back in on that turn and get the Draco Meteor launched into that Roaring Moon, pick up the KO. Really, the important piece about switching the Chien-Pao there out is that you preserve that once again. You can, even after the Draco Meteor, if you needed to, switch the Raging Bolt back out into the Chien-Pao to sacrifice that Pokemon before bringing it back in with a fresh special attack stat to Thunderclap the Kyogre one more time in the endgame.
Yeah. I'm very curious how both of these trainers are going to adjust. I would assume both players are going to bring somewhat of the same Pokemon. Ethan, I'm looking at that Urshifu on his side, the single strike Urshifu, and looking at it, it would do so much damage, but just not being able to protect in the face of these fake outs that John has been so good at cycling, maybe not so great for him, as we are going to see the same leads from last game, surprisingly, with that Chien-Pao taking the Intimidate, Volcarona hitting the field, and John free to go for that fake out and Surging Strikes.
Yeah, I think I would be surprised to see if John goes for that play once again, to see the Urshifu not terrestrialize to that Stellar type. What we've seen from Ethan in both games is that he's had a Pokemon survive on just a little bit of HP, preserving that for the end game to allow more switching around for his Groudon to set up the Sun. If you're going to commit to that Fake Out and Surging Strikes play for John, I think you have to commit to that terrestrialization to the Stellar typing in order to pick up the Chien-Pao. Both games, though, it's been very difficult for John's Kyogre to get into a good position, though, because it hasn't been able to terrestrialize. You know, you've committed that to the Urshifu in Game 1, the Incineroar in Game 2. Just hasn't been an option for the Kyogre to become a Grass type, not care about a Precipice Blades, a Thunder Punch, a Thunder Clap. But we are going to see, just like in the last game, the terrestrialization for Volcarona on turn 1 becoming a Water type, and as in last game 2, no terrestrialization on John's side here in turn 1 as well.
Yeah, so no Terra Stellar means no KO here. Sacred Sword gonna be going into that Incineroar, doing the same thing as we saw last game, and Surging Strikes into Chien-Pao gonna be doing the same thing as we saw last game. So a complete repeat of the turn 1 of last game. Both players, I guess, liking how it turned out for them. I think Ethan does end up on the back foot here with a much lower HP Chien-Pao than John ends up with the Incineroar, but Incineroar, you know, has already kind of done its job. It made room for the Urshifu to get damage off onto Volcarona's partner and can likely just switch out this turn, maybe go for a knockoff, maybe just go for a parting shot if it's carrying that. We haven't seen it yet, but yes, it is carrying that parting shot, just to cycle some things out.
Yeah, and you know, I think the only differences that we had seen in this game versus the last is I think everything's at just a little bit less HP. The Chien-Pao looks at slightly lower than it was in Game 2. The Incineroar, I believe, is 1 or 2 points lower. But finally, we do see some changes. The -1 attack Chien-Pao switching out immediately into the Raging Bolt, coming in on a potential parting shot. And the Incineroar going to switch out here on this turn as well. Should be, I believe, the Roaring Moon. But no, it's going to be not the Roaring Moon. The Rillaboom that we have not seen all set long come in here. And for this now Terra Water Volcarona, pretty solid place for this Rillaboom and this Urshifu. As long as the Urshifu does not get burned by Flame Body once again, believe it is safe here, and Tailwind is just going to come out right away for the Volcarona.
Yeah, so John in a much better spot than he was last game. You know, that Roaring Moon was a solid pick to counteract Tailwinds, but being able to bring this Rillaboom on the field, threaten the Terra Water Volcarona now that it's terrestrialized, and even threaten Groudon is surprising. Even though it's not going to be threatening a huge amount of damage, that Grassy Glide being able to come out before it moves is very, very crucial to John's plan. He doesn't have to play around with the Tailwind speeds. He can just click Grassy Glide and get to it. As you said, though, he does have to be careful about getting burned by this Volcarona, very literally. And we do finally see something on John's side of the field that can resist that Thunderbolt and not take super effective damage from Draco Meteor. It's that Assault Vest Rillaboom.
Yeah, the tried and true Assault Vest Rillaboom has been a staple in VGC for the, I believe, 6 years about that it's been around. Going to see a Detect come out from Urshifu, a Will-O-Wisp straight away, no Grassy Glide on this turn coming out from the Rillaboom, will allow the Rillaboom just to get burned the old-fashioned way. And while Rillaboom, you know, does not take super effective damage from Raging Bolt, you know, you can click another Fake Out, you can click Grassy Glides, not going to be doing that much damage, especially with the burn, and the U-turn just comes out. leaving the Volcarona completely alone, likely just going back into that Incineroar, I would believe.
Yeah, I would say even though John was able to pivot out that Rillaboom, the fact that it took a Will-O-Wisp there is huge, huge for Ethan in slowing down how much damage John can throw out. You know, again, I alluded to the fact that it's able to do a lot of damage to that Groudon. It's able to do a lot of damage to that Volcarona. With that burn, not nearly as much, neutering its attack in half.
Yeah, it's curious for me not to see the Grassy Glide there, because it does, of course, would pick up the KO on the Volcarona. Because the Chien-Pao is at such low HP, if that switches back in, you're going to KO that Pokemon. And if the Groudon switches in, then you can bring in Kyogre later to get rid of the Sun. And the Groudon's not going to like taking a Grassy Glide either.
Yeah.
It's a super effective attack. As now the Urshifu just switches out immediately. Rillaboom comes back in on another Will-O-Wisp. Rillaboom, of course, already burned. And John now just taking some time to reposition to stall out another turn of this Tailwind. This should be, if I'm doing my math right, one more turn after this for Tailwind on Ethan's side. So if John can pick up the KO on the Volcarona this turn, now you have a huge advantage in that there's no more Tailwind, no more redirection for Ethan's side.
So maybe this was the position John was playing for. He was okay getting burned, knowing that if I can get this Volcarona off the field before it can set up another Tailwind and let it go down on the same turn, I'm not at risk of a fast Groudon and a fast Raging Bolt. But we'll see now. Is a burned Grassy Glide or potentially a Wood Hammer even enough to KO this Volcarona after Translation? Not even close!
No, I think that turn had to be a Wood Hammer. Of course, knowing how much damage that the Heat Wave plus potential Draco Meteor might do into the Rillaboom, but it's just going to be a Thunderbolt going into Incineroar. Don't believe that the crit mattered because of the Life Orb. But we are going to see these two Pokemon on John's side, or on Ethan's side, remain on the field and still, honestly, not terribly unhealthy. The Volcarona still, I would think now would faint to a Grassy Glide, but potential damage roll may change some things. But crucially for John, losing out on one of those pivoting pieces, something that we mentioned throughout this contest that is very necessary for winning the Weather War, and even more important, losing another Fake Out Pokemon in order to stop the opposing Raging Bolt from doing the things that Raging Bolt loves to do, which is beat Kyogre.
Yeah. So we do see John's final Pokemon being Kyogre there, is Fire, Water, Grass Core plus Kyogre. And Ethan not switching up his Pokemon, I mean, unless he didn't bring Groudon, but I can't imagine that is anywhere in his mind. In a 20-plus year feud of these two Pokemon, would Groudon not want to fight its arch rival, Kyogre? Another Grassy Glide likely going to be able to pick up Volcarona here, but that Raging Bolt is in just such a commanding position to take out the Kyogre on the opposing side of the field. But we do finally see John go for the Terastallization in this game. It is going to be the Kyogre that's a Grass type and can now resist those Thunderbolts and Thunderclaps. I mean, it was probably shrugging off those Draco Meteors to begin with, but now on that Grass type, going to be less scared of this Raging Bolt.
Yeah, Rillaboom finally picking up the KO now on this Volcarona, preventing another Tailwind from being set up, and John wisely saving this Terastallization early in the game for now his restricted Pokemon. Thunderclap just goes into the Kyogre, still doing a lot of damage, even with the resist. That's a critical hit, would make some sense. We'll now see how much damage this Ice Beam can do back to the Raging Bolt. No Assault Vest, as it sometimes carries, and no Freeze on that turn as well. Doing a very considerable damage and getting confirmation that both of John's Pokemon are faster than this Raging Bolt on Ethan's side because of the Grassy Terrain recovery turn order.
Yeah, so crucially right here is the turn that the grass disappears from the battlefield. Now Chien-Pao can come out onto the field safely and threaten KOs, but it's actually just going to be the Groudon that hits the field.
Yeah, I understand this play as well. You just immediately turn the Sun off, you get your Photosynthesis activated on Raging Bolt, you can get one more Thunderclap off into this Kyogre, just to continue to lower its HP in case, potential Heat Crash may not be enough. Kyogre, a very heavy Pokemon alongside Groudon. But once again, losing a Pokemon early, just getting into the deficit on John's side, makes this game a whole lot more difficult. Maybe not as difficult as to just run right now when it's 3-3, but really, really tough for John. to get around something like the Chen Pao that's going to eventually come out and start clicking Icicle Crash into your 2 grass types.
Yeah, John's going to have to find a way to get Kyogre out while also getting Groudon out. And that's looking nigh impossible. But he's just going to go for a Protect on the Kyogre here, see what the Rillaboom can do. If it gets knocked out on this turn, it would spell doom for John, as he would not be able to get the rain back up in this set. We see a U-turn from the Rillaboom into the Raging Bolt, which is exactly what he wanted here. He's going to be able to get the Rillaboom off the field and get Urshifu back in, which potentially gives Kyogre room to switch out. But if the Urshifu goes down this turn, there is going to be no weather reset, and Urshifu is off the field. Kyogre no longer has room to switch out in this game.
Yeah, a crucial Draco Meteor there for Ethan's side, just covering for any eventuality for that Rillaboom. And unfortunately for John, having the faster Rillaboom than the Raging Bolt gets it off the field before the Draco Meteor goes off. Now you're left once again with a Kyogre in the sun for this endgame, and most unfortunately, 2 grass types in front of a Chen Pao that's just licking its chops in the back.
Yeah, as much as it can lick without shredding its tongue on those Swords of Ruin attached to it. And with the sun on the field, no opportunity for Ethan to even get unlucky with freezes. Those Ice Beams not allowing those freezes, John completely gonna have to depend on the power of Kyogre's Water-type moves if he, can depend on Ice Beam damage, but Heat Crash likely gonna be able to seal this one up, as he actually switches Groudon here out into the Chen Pao.
That's a very curious decision. I would think the Kyogre, has a couple of spread moves that it can lock into right here. And yes, the Raging Bolt will protect itself, not take any damage this turn. The Fake Out goes into Chen Pao and is just enough by itself to pick up the knockout. But this Raging Bolt now, while the Kyogre is stuck on the field in the sun, the Raging Bolt is stuck on the field at -2 special attack after that Draco Meteor, now that Chen Pao is fainted. And Groudon is going to come back out with the sun already up. There are, I have not been keeping too much track, but it should be, I think, 2 turns left of the sun.
That sounds correct.
So really just depend on where this Groudon targets. We've had confirmation now between games 1 and game 3, 3 turns of sun, we just got confirmation there, that the Kyogre is faster than the Groudon, but the Groudon is faster than the Rillaboom.
Yes.
Makes this turn very, very interesting for both of our players.
Yeah, so at first I was scratching my head on that play, but after thinking it through, I think it makes a lot of sense. Yes, Chen Pao could have come in later and threatened damage, but with Grassy Glide, I mean, yeah, you could Sucker Punch, but you'd probably just lose Chen Pao on the next turn. Groudon now able to come in here without having to deal with just a Fake Out and an Ice Beam that would have done huge damage into it. Groudon going to be able to get a lot more out here. Heat Crash going to go into the Kyogre. Thankfully, Kyogre, a very, very heavy whale. Woodhammer going into this Groudon. Thanks to the burn, not enough to KO. We are going to see the recoil damage take out this Rillaboom. No, not yet. And Draco Meteor going to miss yet again for Ethan.
Wow, you would think that would be more than enough to pick up this Rillaboom from 15 HP. The Raging Bolt, though, still on the field after missing that Draco Meteor. I'm sure the Raging Bolt's pretty happy to not have KO'd itself to the Life Orb recoil, and after that, Grassy Terrain Recovery may be out of range of another turn of Life Orb recoil. Now, though, where does this Kyogre attack? You would think an Ice Beam comes out, it's 100% accurate, has the opportunity to pick up a KO this turn with an Ice Beam into either one of Ethan's Pokemon. But everything on the field at such low HP, the Thunderclap comes out, not enough to pick up the Kyogre.
Wow.
Raging Bolt still survives after that turn of Life Orb recoil, but the Ice Beam comes out to pick up the Groudon, and the Rillaboom now has its turn to attack into the Raging Bolt. Even burned, would think that the Woodhammer picks up the maybe 2 HP on this Raging Bolt.
Wow. So this match comes down to the wire, as it usually does with Kyogre and Groudon, but I'm shocked to see John come out on top. I'm looking back and I'm trying to figure out where Ethan could have played better. I do think it was conserving that Chen Pao just for Sucker Punch, if nothing else, would have been huge for him. Had John gone for a Water Spout or an Ice Beam, and a fake out that turn, Raging Bolt still would have survived that turn and would have gotten off some damage, assuming the Draco Meteor doesn't miss, which we knew it did. But if he had been able to get in that Chien-Pao at a later time, likely would have been able to take this match.
Yeah, because we saw how little damage, all things considered, that Water Spout did to the Groudon in the Sun, you would think that the Groudon maybe could have just stuck it out on that turn. You can still protect the Raging Bolt to prevent it from taking any damage, and just trade back nicely, try to knock out, say, the Rillaboom, and just turn it into a 2v1 or a 3v1 on that side. A lot of ways that both of these players could have played those endgames differently. It is unfortunate to see, though, the misses for those Pokemon. The Raging Bolt, the Groudon may want to get their eyes checked after that game. Gets just a whole lot more difficult to win those contests when you can't connect your moves.
Yeah. You and I both wear glasses for a reason. It's so we hit our moves. That's a really unfortunate way to go out, but that's what happens when you are running these inaccurate moves. And I've been a staunch non-believer in Pokemon like this that are running the inaccurate moves because we have so many Pokemon that have perfectly accurate moves now. It's so hard to justify using those inaccurate moves in almost every case.
Yeah, but seeing how bulky that Groudon was and how fast that Groudon was, too, is faster than the Rillaboom, I think there is some merit there.
Yeah.
We had saw Kyogre just finish second at a regional championship earlier today. Some interviews being said that, the big benefit of these Pokemon is that, you're going to miss some moves sometimes, but it's usually not game losing. The keyword there, though, is usually.
Maybe just put high horsepower on the set for when you really need it. I mean, you have 5% of the time. If you really want a Stomping Tantrum, go for it. Earthquake, okay, seeing that gorilla everywhere, not going to be able to justify that one. But that's the end of round 2 here at Balance Patch. Thank you guys for watching, and we will be back for round 3.